And joining me from Washington is Congressman Eli Crane on Talk of the Town. It's the Thursday Roundtable. And Congressman Crane, first of all, welcome. And we want to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year in advance of our interview today.
Hey, thanks a lot, Sanford. I appreciate it.
Nothing boring going on in Washington right now. I would imagine you've got quite a bit on your plate. What is front and center with what you're doing right now?
Well, I think the things that are front and center right now is obviously, trying to deal with our border crisis. Obviously, we're going to be working on impeaching Joe Biden when we get back into session in January. Funding Israel. My staff just dropped a bill, no taxpayer funding for Ivy League schools, which would basically defund any school that has an endowment of $5 billion or more. And then obviously, looking at what's going on with the Colorado Supreme Court. So, there's a lot going on in Washington, D.C. I've been, spending some time doing some town halls in the district the last couple of days. And, there's, as you mentioned, there's a lot going on.
So what's your initial thoughts regarding Speaker Mike Johnson? Are you satisfied, happy? The jury's still out. What's your overall take on his performance so far?
Well, I definitely wouldn't say I'm satisfied, Sanford, but just for a little, context, those of us that, worked on the motion to vacate and basically firing Kevin McCarthy weren't under any, delusions that we would get some Andy Biggs type speaker. We realized that we would probably get a reflection of our conference, but there was a little bit of hope that Mike Johnson could be a transformative speaker. So far, he hasn't shown that, in my opinion. But realistically, I think those of us that moved to vacate McCarthy, we had many discussions, many backroom discussions, and I'll give you the theme of those discussions. The theme was, if we can get a speaker who doesn't lie to us, that's even willing to change the direction of this conference by 3 to 5 degrees, we feel it's worth it. And so, that's what we did. And, this is kind of what I expected. This is what many of us expected. Because at the end of the day, Sanford, we do not have a conservative conference. We don't have a conference with enough people that are serious about fiscal responsibility. And quite honestly, I don't think that we have a conference that really reflects where I think the base of the party's at, and that's putting Americans and America first. And so, it's going to continue to be, a struggle. I'm going to do everything I can to support the speaker. I'll be his biggest cheerleader when he does conservative, righteous things. And I'm also not afraid of being a critic either.
Well, let's start with the border. It obviously is a mess. People that really aren't interested in fixing the problem are quick to dismiss it as saying, well, we have a broken immigration system. What's going on at the border right now has absolutely nothing to do with a broken immigration system. They're just simply turning their backs on the border and on the people of the United States. How are we going to get a hold of this thing? Is some of the budgetary negotiation using the border as kind of a bargaining chip, is that a winning strategy, a losing strategy, or just a wrong-headed strategy?
You brought up a lot of things there, and I think you're hovering around the pulse of the argument, Sanford. The bottom line is the biggest powers that Congress has is the power of the purse. And so as you talk about using the border as, using the purse strings as leverage to get the border, I think that there is some, rationality to that argument. The problem is when, you hear a lot of lawmakers talk about this issue, they talk about tying H.R. 2, House Resolution 2, which was one of the first bills that we passed, which was a very, very righteous piece of legislation and one of the best border bills that's ever come out of the House. And what they're trying to do right now is basically our leadership is trying to tie H.R. 2 to Ukraine funding. And the people I represent do not want any more money. The vast majority of them, I should say, that I talk to don't want any more money going to Ukraine, and I don't blame them one bit. The problem is if you lash HR 2, to Ukraine funding, and even if it was to get signed into law by this Biden administration, they've already shown repeatedly that they have no intent of even following the laws on the books. So you would just, in my opinion, you'd have more laws on the books that they wouldn't be following, since they've shown that actually their intent is to get as many people into the country as possible, which is why we're seeing sometimes 12, 14,000 illegal immigrants. Often those illegal immigrants are military-age males without women and children with them. And so, though I do understand the argument, I think that actually a more, drastic, I think a more hardline approach is necessary. And I would say that you would have to be willing to enter into a budget fight where you were willing to deny key funds to other government agencies in order to get border funding. And I'm afraid that we don't have the strength in our leadership, at least that I've seen, to do that.
Well, I can tell you from my vantage point, at least, I've scratched a divot in my head trying to figure out why it is so darn important for this government to shovel money into Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of theories there, Sanford. I know that I do know that it's a very corrupt country. I do know that there's a lot of money laundering and grifting that goes on over there, and I do believe that many politicians that are pushing for it, are getting kickbacks on their kickbacks, or they're helping their friends that often write them campaign checks, profit, from this war. And so, and then I think that there's also some, Sanford, that righteously feel that, hey, it's anytime we can, fight back and stop one of our biggest adversaries around the world without spilling a drop of American blood, then it's worth it. And I don't tend to agree with that point of view. I know it's one of the more prevailing points of views from some of my colleagues that have supported the funding going over there. But the bottom line is you have to look at this holistically. You have to look at the fact that we're $34 trillion in debt. You have to look at the fact that this could escalate into a nuclear war with one of the largest nuclear powers in the world, who could not only use nuclear warfare against the United States of America in the West, they could use cyber warfare. They could use a whole bunch of different tactics against us. And I don't know about you, Sanford, but I do not trust this administration, to go to war with Russia, let alone Zimbabwe. I mean, we saw what they did in Afghanistan. That was a complete debacle. They can't even protect our own southern border. So I don't know about you, but I don't have a lot of trust in this administration being able to deal with the Russians.
Well, one other item of foreign interest, and that is the ongoing conflict between Hamas and Israel. And it is stunning to me that the court of public opinion turned against Israel, or at least the people that were active in social media tried to portray Israel as being the bad actor, when in fact it was Hamas that started this whole thing, and did so in such a barbaric way that to have university campuses and their presidents somehow sheepish about calling Israel a victim, and instead trying to put them into a position of an oppressor or a perpetrator, it just absolutely, it boggles my mind. It makes me wonder just what country did I grow up in?
No, it's the whole thing is disgusting, and you went through many phases of it. I think the initial attacks were sadistic. I mean, that's the only way I can describe the attacks from Hamas on Israel and the Jewish people. And as I see these protests unfold here in the United States, and quite honestly throughout the world, it just it's unbelievable to me. Actually, I shouldn't say it's unbelievable to me, because as as a man of faith and somebody that regularly reads the Bible, I'm really not surprised because I do believe that the Jewish people in Israel, I do believe that that's God's chosen land, and those are His chosen people. And so I'm not surprised to see, sadistic attacks upon them, because if there's one thing that I've seen in my lifetime, Sanford, it's that anything that God is for, Satan opposes. And I know you probably don't hear politicians talk like this often, but I'm just going to tell you what I think and what I see. That's the only way I can make sense of any of this. I've never seen a people be treated like the Jewish people. And obviously this isn't just a current event. I mean, the way that Jewish people have been treated goes back decades. We can go back to the Holocaust. We can look at so many examples of how they've been mistreated and then demonized by many groups around the world. I'm not okay with it. I'll never be okay with it. And it's one of the reasons, even as an America First candidate, it's one of the only places in the world, that I think that we should be, really invested in, their protection.
Well, let's bring it back home to the decision that was issued recently by the Colorado Supreme Court that removed former President Donald J. Trump from the ballot based on the 14th Amendment and his alleged involvement in insurrection, which so far there hasn't really been a case brought against the former president for insurrection. To me, it looks as though, Congressman Crane, that when you have a court that takes the law into its own hands and does it purely for the purpose of removing a political opponent from the ballot, how is that different from the way the judges functioned in Nazi Germany in the 30s in the run-up to the Hitler regime?
It's not, Sanford, and it's one more example of, I think, what the left wants, and they do want top-down totalitarian control. I don't think that they want, us to have our Bill of Rights, individual protections. But here's what I want to say about this ruling, because I called Boris Epstein, who I've known for a while now, and I worked with him in the past, and he's actually one of Trump's top attorneys, and he was telling me that even though everybody's kicking and screaming and celebrating in the mainstream media about this ruling, it's really just a PR ruling. He said nothing has changed. This court even stayed its own ruling, and he said that as long as the Supreme Court takes this up, as long as the Trump team files with the Supreme Court, Trump is still on the ballot, and unless the Supreme Court doesn't take it up, Trump will, he will be on the ballot. So I think this is going to backfire, like a lot of the things that they've tried to do to President Trump, a lot of the lawfare they've tried to use against him. Not only do I think the Supreme Court's going to take this up, because I know other states are looking at doing it as well, but I think it's going to galvanize the people that support him. I think it's going to draw independents in who realize that this persecution of one man is not okay. And I also think it's going to help the former president, fundraise. So I think this is going to bite them in the rear, like a lot of the things they've done. And I think after talking to somebody in the know, I think that it's important that we keep our eyes on it. But from what I'm being told from inside the Trump team, this doesn't, at least at this point, doesn't change a whole lot.
What do you think the campaign is going to look like? What do you think the people of your district here in Arizona are going to want to hear from you about what is important to them, and how is that going to gauge the way in which you address the issues coming up in the campaign?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not going to change a lot of my message, Sanford. I continue to listen to, the people that sent me there, and one of their biggest frustrations is, why don't Republicans fight for us? And it's something that I heard in my campaign. It's something that I hear all the time. I just did a town hall yesterday down in Casa Grande with Steve Bannon, Matt Gaetz, Andy Biggs, and Raheem Kassam, and it was the same theme. Why don't Republicans fight? Our voters believe that we have the moral, the constitutional high ground. So why don't we fight? And it's like none of the issues, in my opinion, most of the issues haven't changed. I'm still about fiscal responsibility. I've shown that this year in engaging in some of the fights that we got in, from the very first fight we got in with Speaker McCarthy to even firing him. A lot of that had to do with him not being willing to stop spending money we don't have. The border was an issue when we campaigned the last time. It's even more of an issue now. The issues, in my opinion, aren't even really the biggest issue. The issue is that Republicans don't fight. And that's something that I've shown that I'm willing to do. And I know that upsets some people, but at the end of the day, Sanford, I don't believe that we have any chance of defeating the Democrat Party and these radical leftists who showed time and time again, just recently, this week in Colorado, they will do anything it takes for power. If we can't police up ourselves, and if we keep acting like we're all about these issues, but then when we get an opportunity and we have one of these pressure points and we don't actually fight for them when we get the chance, then we don't have a chance of beating them. And so I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And if the people want to send me back from this district, Sanford, they can send me back. And if they don't, then I'll go home and I'll enjoy time with my family, which I don't get a lot of now. And so I'm going to keep doing what I do, brother. And hopefully people see what I'm doing, and we'll see where these cards fall.
Well, I'll tell you, the Colorado Supreme Court certainly had transparency on display. It was transparent as heck what they were trying to do, very arrogant in doing so, and something that I'm glad that there's people like you that are not willing to just sit by, mouth the same old talking points. We've got to get in there and be sure and fight for this country. I think at Christmas time and with a new year around the corner, no better time really to reflect, to get this country back on its proper footing.
Well, thanks for having me on, Sanford. I always appreciate it.
All right. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.